Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Spaceflight Now's live coverage of the latest mission from Vandenberg Space Force Base. I'm Will Robinson Smith, reporter with Spaceflight Now. It's good to be with you here on this Wednesday morning, February 25th. We're broadcasting from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. I'm glad you're able to stop by. So we've got a little more than 400 of you watching along with us live this morning. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking that like button and sharing the stream. Allows more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage today. Following a successful Falcon 9 launch from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station last evening, you're looking at the launch of another Falcon 9 rocket set to depart at the time on your screen, 6:17 a.m. Pacific, 9:17 a.m. Eastern, 17:14 UTC for our friends joining around the world. Our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, is running the technical operations of the broadcast today. Given that this is a West Coast venture, our photographers do have this broadcast off. But if you're not following the fellas on X, you can find them at their handles here on the screen. Adam is at Aburn NYC, Michael at MD Kane Jr., John at John Pisani Photo. And be sure to follow Spaceflight Now simply at Spaceflight Now. We are also on Blue Sky, Threads, and Facebook for those of you who are not on X. And while our photography team will be off as far as this launch is concerned, that doesn't mean they're not going to be busy today. Of course, in addition to the flight of the Falcon 9 rocket from Vandenberg Space Force Base, we are also keeping close tabs on what is happening here at the Kennedy Space Center, where in just about 10 minutes' time, NASA is scheduled for first motion of its Space Launch System rocket atop the mobile launcher. You can see beneath the full stack there is the crawler transporter, which moved into position during our coverage yesterday of the Starlink 6-110 mission launch. Now fully situated, there's about 9 minutes remaining before, again, first motion, which is set for 9 a.m. Eastern, 1400 UTC. The rocket will travel a roughly 4-mile journey back to the vehicle assembly building, and it will be inside that building where NASA teams will assess a helium flow issue that cropped up following a successful wet dress rehearsal that wrapped up on Thursday. That's the destination of the rocket stack. It will be going into the door on the right from this camera perspective. That is High Bay 3. To the right of the VAB, you can see the future for the SLS rockets after the Artemis 3 mission. As currently architected, beginning with Artemis 4, the Orion spacecraft will hitch a ride on top of the SLS Block 1B, which will use the exploration upper stage, as opposed to what is currently flying, which is called the ICPS, or the Interim Cryogenic Propulsion Stage. One of the key differences between the two is that the ICPS is powered by a single RL-10C engine. Meanwhile, the exploration upper stage will have 4 RL-10 engines and also be slightly longer than the ICPS, which means the rocket stack will be taller in total. And so the various umbilicals and the crew access arm, where they are currently perfectly situated for the SLS rocket in its current configuration, won't be suitable for the Block 1B version of the rocket. The work continues on the mobile launcher 2 there beside the vehicle assembly building. Bringing it back here to the Falcon 9 rocket, set to fly in less than 25 minutes. At this point, SpaceX is about 10 minutes into the fuel loading process, beginning with the loading up of liquid oxygen on board the rocket's first stage and RP-1 rocket's fuel, a rocket-grade kerosene, on the first and second stages. Let's go ahead and take a beat to walk you through the countdown timeline, the milestones still out ahead of the flight of the Falcon 9. About 6 minutes ago is when SpaceX started to load cryogenic helium onto the pressure vessels for the Falcon 9's first stage, and did the same on the second stage just about a couple of minutes ago when that started. The helium is important because it's used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. Coming up in about 30 seconds is when second stage RP-1 loading should wrap up. Then after that, T-minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds, had we eyes on the rocket at this point in the count, we would be seeing the start of the strong back chill down, when SpaceX thermally conditions the feed lines at the pad prior to loading liquid oxygen on board the vehicle. That upper stage lock zone will begin at T-minus 16 minutes. Moving right along at T-minus 7 minutes is when the engine chill begins. SpaceX flows a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps. That helps to protect the engines from thermal shock and subsequent damage during startup. 6 minutes before flight, the first stage kerosene tank should be full. And at T-minus 4.5 minutes, at which point we will have camera views from SpaceX, we'll see the strong back retract sequence get underway. Here at Vandenberg, once the clamp arms have opened up, the strong back, or the transporter erector, will recline away from the Falcon 9 rocket about 13 degrees, and it stays in that position up to and through liftoff. 3 minutes before that departure time, the first stage liquid oxygen tank should be full. We'll hear a similar call regarding the rocket's second stage about a minute after that. At this point, the Falcon 9 will be fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, as we hear the call out that the Falcon 9 has entered into its automated startup, control of the countdown will be handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers, and at the same time, the propellant tanks will be brought up to flight pressure. The SpaceX launch director will then confirm that they are go for launch at T-minus 45 seconds. The engine ignition command will be given at T-minus 3 seconds. And if all 9 Merlin engines are healthy and ignite as expected, the command will be given for the hold down clamps to release the Falcon 9 rocket for a T0 liftoff. Once again, at the time you see here on your screen, 6:17 a.m. Pacific, 9:17 a.m. Eastern, 14:17 UTC for those around the world. And for those who care about hyperspecificity, that is those times plus 49 seconds. As we're coming up to the time starting the so-called big event, I want to take a beat to thank one of our channel members, Cumulus Granatus, for being with us to help answer folks' questions in the chat. Speaking of our channel members, they make this and every other live launch opportunity possible. So thanks to folks like Cobra Emergency, Skunk Hogger. Virginia Ramirez is with us this morning. This is Ed 3. Good morning to you. And many, many others. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, which is shop.spaceflightnow.com. Access to member-only videos here on YouTube. Access to our members-only Discord server. And, of course, the ability to watch all of our live launch liftoff moments from here in Florida in 4K. Also, if you have a comment or question about this mission or other goings-on in the realm of space or spaceflight, or just want to offer a little bit of support for the coverage this morning, you can use the YouTube Super Chat feature to have your comment or query elevated for possible discussion. Of course, assuming that it is appropriate to be read aloud as part of the broadcast. And I want to thank Mrs. Ed3, marking now 21 months with us as a channel member at the pad leader level. It says 21 months of rocket fun, creeping up on 2 years. Just about 18 and a half minutes remaining on the clock right now, taking a spin over on the weather side of things. The weather loop here from NOAA's GOES West satellite makes it look like it's a better picture than it actually is from the ground. There's some fog hanging around the area as well as some low clouds, so may not be the best visibility for those in the immediate vicinity of Vandenberg. The Falcon 9 rocket will take a southerly turn on leaving the pad. Also, let us know where you're watching from today. If you're there in southern to central California or a little bit further flung. I see we've got Nene joining us from South Korea. Debbie Johnson checking in from Northern California. Looks like we've got Pennsylvania here with us this morning. Jamie checking in from England. Mr. Dr. XYZ joining us from Nice in France. Always lovely to see where our global audience is representing. And as you can see, we are just about 16 and a half minutes away from liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket. At this point in the count, the big vent is wrapping up, and we're just about 20 seconds away from SpaceX starting to load liquid oxygen on board the rocket's upper stage. With liquid oxygen now flowing on board the rocket's upper stage, let's go ahead and actually talk about the first stage of this rocket, part of the vehicle that is designed for reuse in addition to the payload fairings. SpaceX today is flying the booster with the tail number 1093. This will be its 11th flight so far. It first began flying on April 7th of 2025, the Starlink 11-11 mission. And in fact, the vast majority of this booster's flight history has been in support of the Starlink constellation, with the exception of a couple in the middle. So we'll take a beat to pause here. Back on September 10th of last year, launched the first operational batch of the Space Development Agency's low Earth orbit constellation. This particular batch of satellites was for a piece called Tranche 1 Transport Layer B. That was followed up by another batch of satellites for the Tranche 1 transport layer. And it's back to Starlink land we go until today, where we'll have the 11th flight launching Starlink 17-26 in just about 14 minutes' time. Time now just under 12 minutes to the departure of the Falcon 9 rocket. Let's talk about the payload that's on board today's Falcon 9. A batch of 25 Starlink V2 Mini optimized satellites heading into low Earth orbit. This mission today marks SpaceX's 19th flight supporting its Starlink constellation. And as we noted in our preview article, on board this Falcon 9 rocket will be the 500th Starlink satellite launched to space so far in 2026. To date, the company has launched more than 11,000 Starlink satellites, but currently there are roughly 9,800 still on orbit. These V2 Mini optimized satellites are considerably lighter than the predecessor Starlink V2 Minis, as you can see on the right-hand side of the screen. With their solar panels unfurled, these satellites have a wingspan of about 100 feet or about 30 meters. They use argon Hall effect thrusters for in-orbit maneuvering. Built up in Redmond, Washington, in the facilities that you're seeing here on the screen in the video to the left. These particular satellites will be deployed at an altitude of about 163 miles or 262 kilometers. And they'll be deployed and operated at a 97.3 degree inclination. Of course, SpaceX won't show deployment live. It hasn't for a Starlink mission in some time. We'll be relying on an update via their social channels to confirm good deployment a little more than an hour after liftoff. As we're now just about 9.5 minutes away from the departure of the Falcon 9 rocket. Again, we're also keeping close tabs on the departure of the Space Launch System rocket, not for a launch, unfortunately, but for its return to the vehicle assembly building. So far, have not seen an update from NASA confirming that first motion has taken place. In fact, we haven't seen any discernible motion, and can't say with any certainty that it's been lifted off the pedestals just yet. So may still be some time before we start to see any forward motion of the SLS rocket as it makes its roughly 4-mile journey back to the vehicle assembly building. NASA had delayed the return of the rocket, the rollback, because of high winds and cold temperatures that we saw yesterday that didn't make things conducive for a rollback attempt. But of course, when this launch coverage for the Falcon 9 is wrapped up, you can head on over whenever it's convenient for you to our 24/7 live stream, Launchpad Live, and go ahead and check in on the status of the SLS rocket and its return to the VAB. Time now T minus 7 minutes and counting. At this point, SpaceX is flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps to help protect the engines from thermal shock and damage at startup. And in less than a minute's time, the first stage RP-1 tank should be full. Before we see the Falcon 9 rocket take off, and we get our live views coming up here momentarily, let's talk a little bit more in detail about where this Falcon 9 rocket will be flying once it does leave the pad. Turning to trajectory now. The Falcon 9 rocket will fly on a southerly path once it does depart Space Launch Complex 4 East there at Vandenberg. Less than 3 minutes after liftoff, the first and second stages will separate, and the booster, with a tail number 1093, will target a landing on the drone ship called, of course, I Still Love You. If successful, this will be the 180th booster landing on this particular vessel and the 474th booster landing on a drone ship to date. SpaceX also intends to recover the payload fairings, which will splash down in the waters of the Pacific Ocean a little bit further downrange from where the booster lands on the drone ship. Once in the water, it will be brought aboard, or they will be brought aboard, a SpaceX recovery vessel like the one you see here on your screen, then brought through the port of Long Beach onto SpaceX facilities there at Vandenberg, where they will be refurbished and turned around for future missions.
Rising for strong back retract.
And I will say, as you can generally see, or really just sort of see the impression of it, we're getting a very foggy pad level view of the Falcon 9 rocket provided by SpaceX. little bit of a bouncing focus there. So apologies, we have no control over that
Strong back
shifting.
lower has started.
You can just barely make out the outline of the Falcon 9 rocket, slightly to the left, part of that sort of center shadow. The strong back to the right, which is just coming up to the point where here we would be seeing the clamp arms opening up beneath the payload fairings. Have to go on a little faith that it's actually in work, given the timing before liftoff. At this point in the count, 2 minus 3 minutes, 47 seconds, the strong back will be in its reclining mode, pulling back about 13 degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket. Here at Vandenberg, it stays in that reclined position up to and through liftoff. There's no additional motion at the point of departure. As we're coming up on the final fueling milestones, want to quickly thank the Kaiser for a $5 super chat. Says good morning, mods, and good morning to his words, not mine, famous Will Robinson. Stop paying me, I promise. That is true. I'm not, but appreciate it. Hopefully, we'll see you in Anaheim.
Stage 1, LOX load complete.
SpaceX. Confirmation of stage 1 LOX load. We should hear a similar call regarding the rocket's second stage in about a minute's time. Well, if you are in Anaheim, hopefully you're able to spend at least part of your day at the happiest place on Earth. If so, you may actually run into my brother. I also want to thank channel member Skunkhogger for the $10 super chat. It's his first time in a couple weeks I've caught a launch live, not on demand. Thanks for the opportunity to watch. Well, we're glad you're able to join us here live. There's nothing like watching along with a bunch of other launch enthusiasts. Under 2 minutes on the clock now.
Stage 2, LOX load complete.
And with that good call, the Falcon 9 rocket is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. Just for a quick note, the SLS rocket on the mobile launcher
Gas launch closeout
has been lifted off the pedestals, so we are getting towards the point of first forward motion. You can make out the ground gas closeouts against the other fog there at the pad, as it's starting to get a bit brighter there on the west coast.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
LD is go for launch.
And with that good go for launch call, we're going to go ahead and step back on our commentary and join you on the other side of liftoff.
T minus 30 seconds. T minus 15 seconds. T minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. And liftoff. Go SpaceX, go Starlink.
Vehicle is pitching downrange.
M1D chamber pressures are nominal.
Power and telemetry nominal.
Vehicle is supersonic. Max Q.
In that confirmation of max Q, the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. Coming up on a minute and a half into flight so far, all appearing to go nominally for this Starlink mission, 17-26. Coming up to MVAC chill next. Not hearing the call for MVAC chill, but that happens from time to time. That's the thermal conditioning of the Merlin vacuum engine on the rocket's upper stage. Coming up next, though, there are a few events in fairly rapid succession. We'll see first stage main engine cutoff for MECO at about T plus 2 minutes and 27 seconds into flight. That'll be followed by stage separation and then the ignition of that Merlin vacuum engine. The payload fairings will jettison about 3 minutes into the mission.
Stage separation confirmed.
MVAC startup.
Fairing separation confirmed.
Good call out regarding the payload fairings, and you can see one of those falling back to Earth just to the left of the engine nozzle in the box on the right side of the screen. Those fairing halves will be recovered further downrange from where the booster lands on the drone ship. Of course, I still love you. SpaceX is working to certify its first stage boosters and its fairing halves for up to 40 flights apiece. So far, they have achieved a total of 33 flights on their most flown booster, that is B-1067, which we saw fly just a few days ago, back on the 22nd. Now, a little more than 4 minutes into the flight, in less than 2 minutes, will be the start of the 3-engine entry burn. That will help to dramatically slow the booster down. You can see the booster 1093 has reached its apogee in today's flight, starting to make its descent towards the drone ship. The entry burn will last less than 30 seconds in duration. Sounds like some folks a little bit further south of the pad had some pretty good views today. Iliano says visibility was perfect from where they were situated. Stephen Personal says from Long Beach it looked amazing before stage separation.
Stage 1 FTS is saved.
Stage 1 entry burn startup. Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
And with a good end to the entry burn, coming up next will be the start of the single engine landing burn. SpaceX will reignite the center engine on the Falcon 9 first stage booster just a little before the clock in the center bottom of the screen reaches 8 minutes. And that will take it down to land on the drone ship. Of course, I still love you.
Stage 1 transonic.
Stage 2 FTS is saved.
Stage 1 landing burn.
Stage 2 is in terminal guidance.
Stage 1 landing leg deploy. Stage 1 landing confirmed.
And a good sunrise touchdown for Falcon Booster 1093.
MVAC shutdown.
Nominal orbit insertion.
And with those two good callouts, the upper stage will now coast until just about 53 minutes post liftoff. There will be a 1-second burn to circularize the upper stage's orbit, and then the Starlink satellites will be deployed at about T plus 1 hour, 1 minute, and 49 seconds post liftoff. And with that, we're going to go ahead and start to wind things up, turning to our mission stats. But before we do, want to draw your attention back over to Launch Complex 39B, where we are starting to see some more notable gaps, showing that the mobile launcher is coming off of the pedestals and will pretty soon get into forward motion, beginning the 4-mile crawl from here at the launch pad back to the vehicle assembly building, where teams can further diagnose and repair the issue that led to slowing and stoppage of helium flow on the rocket's upper stage. You can head on over to our 24/7 live stream Artemis Live if you want to keep checking the progress of the SLS rocket throughout the course of today. In the meantime, winding things up here with the Falcon 9 rocket launch with a successful liftoff and touchdown of the first stage booster. That marked the 11th flight for 1093. This was SpaceX's 606th Falcon 9 launch to date. The 24th of the year so far. This was the company's 540th Falcon booster reflight, or the launch of a booster that has flown at least once. This was the company's 166th orbital launch within the last 365 days. The 182nd orbital flight from Pad 4 East for SpaceX, and the 250th overall orbital launch from this pad as well. Here's a look at the bar chart representation of Falcon launches. Turning to recovery stats, the landing we just saw was the 180th good touchdown on that particular vessel. Of course, I still love you. That marked SpaceX's 474th drone ship landing, the 577th booster landing for SpaceX, and the 578th overall booster landing for an orbital class rocket. Blue Origin's Never Tell Me the Odds is getting ready for its second flight, and this will be the first reuse of a booster for Blue Origin on the launch of the Bluebird 7 mission for AST Space Mobile. Launch date TBD. The company was targeting late February, but given that it is February 25th right now, and we've not heard a whole heck of a lot about where things stand for that mission, I would say early March is probably the next safest bet for when that rocket will fly. We'll, of course, have live coverage of that as it develops. In the meantime, with some industry stats to close things out, this was the 12th orbital launch from California this year, the 25th from U.S. soil, the 27th from a U.S. rocket company, and the 41st orbital launch around the world. Just to note, Rocket Lab, of course, is coming up on its next flight from here in the United States with its Electron rocket. However, that is a suborbital hypersonic test, so it will not be counted as part of these launch stats. Just want to make note of that. The next orbital launch, or one of the next orbital launches that we're tracking, will be from here in California. Not from SpaceX, but we're looking at the launch of Firefly's Alpha rocket, which is set for a return to flight mission no earlier than February 28th. Before then, though, there is another Falcon 9 rocket scheduled to take flight on February 27th, early in the morning. Liftoff currently scheduled during a window that opens up at 4:52 a.m. Eastern. Rounding out the launch stats, there have been 3 orbital failures so far this year. Here's where the pie chart currently stands. The U.S. still holding about 2/3 of all the launches globally, China representing about a quarter of them. And now we'll go ahead and do it for us here today on the launch of the Starlink 17-26 mission. Certainly appreciate your time and attention. Thanks for stopping by. I want to thank, again, Cumulus Granatus for helping to answer folks' questions in the chat. And thanks to our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, for running the technical operations of the broadcast. And most importantly, thanks to you for wherever you've been watching from. We certainly appreciate your time and attention. Don't take it for granted. And look forward to welcoming you back in here when next we have a launch to cover. We hope you enjoy the views throughout the day over on Artemis Live or Launchpad Live, whichever your preference, as we track the return of the Space Launch System rocket to the vehicle assembly building. Roughly 12-hour process. So it'll be a few hours past nightfall by the time it's back in the barn. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Remember, be good to yourselves, be good to others, and we will see you next time, folks. Until then, bye-bye.